we have a very cozy and intimate event tonight, and I'm so excited. So my name is Julie, I'm the events manager here at Roundabout. And I just wanted to remind everyone, as we are having events back in the store, please check our newsletter to find out which ones will be in store, on Zoom, a hybrid, or here tonight. We also have our local shelf right here, which lists all of our upcoming events as well as our upcoming book club. So we pretty much have something happening in the store twice a week. So come visit us. We're here. We love you. I'm so excited to hear about this book and to make the fun starcraft that Kelly brought tonight. So she is gracing us from Salem. We drove over just today, so thank you so much for that. We love that people will come and visit us in Bend, as Bend grows and as our store grows, and we just love having everybody here. So I think most of you know her background, but I love just the very first part of this. Kelly Williams Brown had 700 bad days, and bad days is the worst. So I'm not going to give away much more of the book, only to say that as the author of Adulting and now this book, we are so, so grateful to have someone who is considered a New York Times bestselling author in our bookstore. So I'm going to turn it over to her because I want to hear as much about this as you guys do. So please give a warm welcome to Kelly Williams Brown. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Hello. Good to see you. Do you think Rachel's going to do that? Right. I'm so glad to see everyone here. As somebody who likes to stay at home and not go do things or see people, I'm always very, very honored when people come out. And I hope anybody who's watching this is enjoying it as well. And thank you so much to Roundabout Books for having me. It was a gorgeous drive. And on top of that, I love a local bookstore. And the way to get here was so exciting because rather than make me go through Bend, they had me go through all these back roads. So I really love this. So my name is Kelly Williams Brown. I am an author of this book. And I really never saw myself writing a memoir or really anything about myself. I'm pretty private. My other books, I started as a reporter, and I always felt really, really comfortable going and reporting information and bringing it to people and being like, look, here are what the experts said. In the case of my first book, Adulting, which is called How to Grow Up in 535 Easy-ish Steps, that was just really simple stuff. Like, here's how bleach works. Here is how insurance works. Like, if you were looking for an apartment, did you think to check the plugs and the water pressure? And the information didn't come from me. It came from a lot of outside sources that I had gone and who did know how to be competent adults. And I would listen to them tell me these things, and I'd think, wow, I'm really never going to get it together. And then I would go back and I would write it all down. And it became a book that people really enjoyed and that I was really honored. It has been translated into like 14 languages. And all of a sudden, people had this idea that I was like a very with it and together person, even though I was extremely clear in the book that I was a mess. Like I had pointed out that I was writing this book because I myself didn't feel like I was an adult, and I felt like there were things that everybody knew that I didn't, and that everybody was doing a better job than me, and maybe I could get to the bottom of why. However, that didn't translate. I do also have to apologize right now for inventing the word adulting. I know it's annoying. I know it's everywhere. The first time I said it, I knew it was annoying, and but I was like, man, but nobody's ever going to forget that. And I had no idea that it would do this to everyone. I apologize. I want you all to know that I don't get any money when I see it like on a hat at Target or something. So, please don't hold me at fault there. So the world had this idea of me as like a very together and with it person, even though I never was. And I think I myself had an idea of how life sort of goes, how it unfolds, right? Like I was really lucky to grow up in a home where it was, it was assumed that I would probably go to college, right? So you go through high school and then you graduate and you go to college, you want to do, and then you work a little bit in that career, hopefully, or a different one. Then you find someone to get married who is suitable, and then you marry them, and then you have kids, and then you raise the kids, and then the kids go off, and then you're dead, right? Like it's like a pretty linear, straightforward process. And I, like a lot of like middle-class children in the 90s, I thought that if I followed all these steps and did these things, that my life would be orderly and it would be straightforward. And then at a certain point, I found that I was in a marriage that I should not be in, which you will hear about when I read about it in a moment. And I did something that was so out of character for me, which is that I left the marriage. And I left my marriage. I was not married for a long time. It was time to like have kids or get out. And I was like, well, if you have kids, then you're going to be here forever. And so I really totally overturned the apple cart. I thought I was like very brave and free, and I was brave and I was free. But then all sorts of terrible things started happening to me, one after another. We're not going to like go through all of them. If you are curious, you may read the book. They're all in there. But among other things, like I broke 3 of my 4 limbs in separate and unrelated incidents. So I didn't have either of my arms for a time. It was very difficult. Certain someone was inaugurated president. I fell into a deep depression. My dad got cancer. My grandmother died. My cat died. I stayed some time in the asylum, in the sanitarium, which like I always joke, like, what is even the point of being a writer if they don't like send you off to if they don't cart you off to the loony bin at some point? And so in the words of one of my friends, she's like, well, a book happened to you, and I got through all of these things and all of these tenets of like who I had thought I was and what I thought my life was going to be turned out to be completely incorrect. And so then it became a question of, okay, well, what do I do now? Like, how do I rebuild a life out of all of these absolute shambles? So I do address that in the book as well, but really what kept me going through all of these sort of horrific things was compulsive crafting, just nonstop. I'm talking making like 10,000 lucky paper stars, or making embroidery for every single human I knew, or teaching myself to do line of cut prints, like those block prints, and then doing those nonstop, or making shrink eating charm bracelets. Or, I mean, the crafts that I was doing were not beautiful by any means. They were like very rudimentary. But I found that in the moment, if I could just like focus in on that one small thing, on making that little tiny fold, or making this little tiny cut exactly the way I wanted to, that in that moment, I didn't have to think about the fact that I was in a terrible relationship. I didn't have to think about the fact that this book that I really cared about had totally flopped. I didn't have to think about the fact that I was living a life that was unrecognizable to myself. I could just be there in that moment. And so within this book, you will find tales of bad times, and you will find some extremely simple crafts, like crafts kind of for kids. And that's okay, because another funny thing about the time of the book is that part of what happens within the book is that I find myself sort of agoraphobic and housebound by injury and then depression. And so, I had finally sort of like gotten out of the house, and then all of a sudden the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden everyone in the world, I'm so sorry, I did not mean to be a trendsetter on this, was also a depressed agoraphobe who was afraid by other people and kept housebound by illness. And so it was extremely funny to sort of test out the mechanisms and the coping skills that I had developed during my own miniature quarantine within the scope of the larger quarantine. But when this book came out, I thought, well, I mean, who cares now? You know what I mean? Like, it's just a book about some sad but ultimately normal things that happened to me, right? It's nothing like I was a refugee in a camp, and through like sheer triumph of the human spirit, like made it through, got my doctorate at Harvard Divinity School, right? Like, these are like normal bad things that happen to people. But what I also found was that I think all of us, to some extent, are living in like real times of despair and loneliness and alienation. I think we feel really disconnected from another, like more and more as time goes on. We feel disconnected because of politics, and we feel disconnected because of the quarantine, and we feel disconnected because we don't have these kinship networks that people used to have, where you would just go to church every Sunday and you would see your Sunday people, or you would start to work for a company and you would work for them until you retired. People our age a lot of times aren't having kids. We don't have that natural built-in network. And so it becomes a real question of like, how do we knit ourselves back together? And then once we're together, how do we knit other people back together? And also I make a lot of jokes because that's the only way I know to cope with anything difficult. To me, humor is the ultimate way of reclaiming any kind of trauma or difficulty, because if I can laugh at something, that means I have the power over it, right? And that's why I use the word insane in the title. I think it's so much more fun to be like, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I was quite insane, rather than being like, my name is Kelly and I struggle every day with mental illness. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to have it, you might as well have some fun with it, right? So it's definitely a little bit of an irreverent book in some ways, despite the fact that it does cover some really dark territory. But on the other hand, I really do feel like, comedy is tragedy plus time. And the more I can day by day sort of figure out how to make art out of something. Sorry, I know it's very salty language. How to make art out of shitty things, and how to reclaim a painful experience as my own, how to try to discern what I thought the lesson was there, or at the very least, how to distract myself by making some dumb little cars, the more successful day to day I feel. So we're going to start off with chapter 1, Unmarried, in which I leave my spouse, flee to Independence, Oregon, and assume a future so bright, protective eyewear is required. It was the summer of 2016, and I was the manifestation of a 1990s country song about how cool it is to be a gal. My freedom and self-sufficiency oozed from every pore. I felt more powerful. How's our mic?
It's okay.
That's okay. I felt more in control of my life than ever before. I was excited about the future. I was bopping around in a 1994 Mazda Miata, and it was great. I ejected from my marriage after only a few months, leaving behind a brilliant, loving, and man. I fled to Independence, Oregon. Get it? Population 8,590. I know I'm in Independence because it says that on the water tower right outside my window, and also because I am living a romantic comedy with zero subtlety. I feel an overwhelming sense of freedom that I escaped something I thought inescapable. I'm terribly sad, but mostly relieved. And, of course, tremendous shame. I got married even though I knew I should, and I hadn't even made it to our anniversary. Why did you marry him? You might ask. Easy. He was the smartest, funniest, and kindest person I'd ever met. All three, by a long shot. He would casually drop things in conversation that rearranged my understanding of the universe. He was, and is, astonishingly loyal and loving. He's a man in his 30s who makes new friends and then keeps them forever, along with dozens of other friends he made starting when he was 5. He loves, fiercely and loyally, the shit out of people, even, and especially, when they can't love themselves. His table is big. Whenever we went anywhere, he had a bunch of people to see, and all those people were amazing too. Before we met, he would save up money and then go on, say, a 4-month trip via Amtrak around the United States. He'd been everywhere. He's the best storyteller I've ever known. When I heard him recount a story, even if I had been there, it was changed, becoming hilarious and true in ways I hadn't seen. I loved living in the world of his stories. He made me laugh so, so hard, every day, every hour. I would think of his jokes days later and laugh. I still do. We were hanging out at his apartment early on, and somehow flirting came up. I tossed off a dumb joke I've made to every guy I've dated since I was 19, to the effect that although flirting was fine for other people, I myself would never do it. Yeah, no, me either, he said, and then frowned, looking worried. I mean, what do you think it feels like? Do you think it hurts? These so much fun. This happened in 2012, and I still sometimes remember that laugh. On our first date, I told one of my amusing anecdotes, trademark, that I had probably told a dozen times. It was about the first time I was on assignment with one of my Mississippi coworkers, who I will call Don, a charming and insane photographer in his 50s. As soon as we were on the highway, Don, with no prompting or encouragement from me, launched into a story about the time he was caught trafficking 50 pounds of weed from rural Mississippi in the 70s. I won't relay the whole roundabout tale here, but the punchline was, when the biker said, "Oh yeah, that state trooper? That was my brother-in-law. I was testing you." Former husband, it's a really good story, y'all. Former husband laughed and then said, "And you know, it's funny because, of course, that story was also his way of testing you." I almost fell off my stool. No one else had noticed this thing or arrived at this analysis any of the times I told it, not even close. It was a pattern that repeated itself again and again, a spoonful weight of time. He was smarter and infinitely better read than me, which of course was hideously annoying, but mostly I could only marvel at his brain, which is so fast. When I was around him, the charisma got all over me. I was funnier somehow, quicker and cleverer. He made me laugh until I peed, and in return, he told me I was the funniest woman he'd ever met, which goes a long way with me. No matter how much I seemed to upset him, I knew he saw me in a way that no one else ever had, and that he loved what he saw, the good, the bad, and the ugly. He wrote song after song about me, not uniformly flattering, but all exceptionally loving. One time I was wandering around in my underwear and he looked up. "Jesus fucking Christ, this is ridiculous. You look like a really hot woman, or a drawing in a comic book done by someone who actually likes women." I have a gap in my front teeth that I've always been sensitive about. As in, there were large flaws in my life where I thought I would be cute if it weren't for that gap. I have a terribly awkward smile because I spent the first 25 years of my life making sure my lips were firmly closed. At one point, I looked into closing the gap. He was aghast. Why would you want to look more like everyone else in the world? So then what was the problem? Well, as you read the following, please know that I have my side of the story and he has his, and there is no way I could fairly and accurately part with them. And that I did love him, and I do love him, and I wouldn't take back any of it. I would, in fact, give him a fairly glowing letter of recommendation to anyone who wanted to marry him who isn't me. However, we could not get along for a week to save our goddamn lives. Everything had to be a fight. I am quite conflict averse and had never really fought with a significant other before. So imagine my surprise when he got mad at me on our third date, which I'd been terribly late for. In my defense, I tried to cancel, saying my day had filled up and I couldn't get up to Portland in time. But he had said that he had been looking forward to it, he planned our date, insisted I'd be there, and would not reschedule. When I finally did arrive, he wasn't in his apartment, but at a coffee shop nearby, tutoring one of his friends in math. He told me coldly that I could wait until he was done, and so I did, sitting chastised and quiet a few tables away. I'd apologize, starting with one I tried to reschedule, but it still took another one before he looked me in the eyes and told me he forgave him. I won't lie, this dynamic was new to me, and I interpreted it not as someone with a, say, rigid belief system who might not always consider my point of view, but rather as someone who respected himself. Or maybe both were true. He had an endless appetite for what he framed as debate, but was often extremely stressful for me. Did not share his love of verbal sparring, and I withdrew. When something was wrong between us, always, I imagined myself folding inward, becoming a small, smooth stone, going to a place where whatever bullshit we were on about now couldn't affect me. I appeased and said whatever insincere thing I thought would end the argument. Feel free to place a bet on whether this made things better or worse. I tried, in my unhealthy way, to put an end to our ongoing discord. I twisted and turned, contorted, and moved as quietly as I could. But it seemed that no matter what I did, I always upset him, with words or actions or inaction, in ways I could not predict. I couldn't be someone who conducted herself in a manner he found acceptable and didn't warrant constant criticism. Eventually, I realized this person just didn't exist. Or maybe she did, but I sure as hell wasn't her. At some point, I apparently decided I may as well be dramatically not her. If you don't like me when I'm trying, oh boy, wait until you see what I do when I am entirely out of fucks. In the grand tradition of misery, I did not keep it to myself, but was generous enough to spread my unhappiness around. I drank 4 or 5 glasses of wine a night because at that level of drunk, you can pretend a lot of things are okay, and the next day you can lament your hangover instead of where your choices have brought you. I withheld love and avoided him. The more he ran toward me, the more I desperately wanted to bolt. We were the couple who stressed out others by being constantly tense around each other. I resented it and tried to paper over everything rather than actually solve our problem. Something neat about staying in a decaying relationship is your slow but notable transformation into a version of yourself who is unrecognizable. This person is so different from who you imagine yourself to be, yet she looks, talks, and cries just like you. When did you get so angry? I decided perhaps that one didn't get to be happy in their relationships. The fighting all the time, about everything, was something I needed to be more zen about. Some people are tall, some people are extremely good at billiards, and some people find life much easier and more calming when they are on the opposite side of the country from their significant other. Variety, spice of life. Like I said earlier, a few pages earlier, I loved him. He loved me. He was unlike anyone I'd ever met before, and as excruciating as life was, life without him felt like it would be worse. He made me feel incredibly safe. He was protective, loyal, and caring, and the same scrappiness that made me crazy at home meant that he moved through life true to his principles and unafraid. I truly admired him. He took me to new ideas, new ways of looking at the world, and new ways to be. But despite all this, we could not get along. The way to solve these problems? Yep, get married. I am a serial monogamous and had, before he arrived, bailed on several great boyfriends who were marriage material. But I always feel the urge to bolt when I wanted to settle down. The commonality in my relationships is me. Therefore, perhaps, I was the problem. Maybe I was the one incapable of accurately assessing my own relationships and should instead outsource this job to the general community. My friends loved him. In fact, we had lots of people in common before we dated, all of whom were delighted by this pairing. Also, we felt like we should get married, and I was on the wrong side of 30. According to some of my Louisiana college sorority friends, I was on the wrong side of 25. And, this doesn't make me proud, like so many middle-class 90s children, I grew up thinking there was a sensible and obvious order to life. If you followed it, you would be okay. I'd already checked the college and career boxes, so now it's time to check marriage and children. If anyone reading this is engaged and terrified and constantly doubting yourself, don't do it. I know how easy this is to say and how impossible it is to act upon. But seriously and truly, you do not have to get married. That shit is fucking optional. Any engagement, however conflicted, feels like a huge ball rolling fast. It's mass composed of family and friends' expectations and travel plans and deposits and caterers, and the fact that you have made this giant public announcement and everyone liked it on Instagram, and it's hard to break up even when you're not engaged, and forever. There might be 14 million external reasons why you should get married. But what if the only reason you shouldn't is inside you? And what if you aren't sure you can trust yourself? So here now is my promise to you. If any of you ever need to leave someone, even the day of, even at the altar, and you are within 50 miles of Salem, Oregon, just email me. Please save me at kellywilliamsbrown.com. I will come to you like a falcon to the falconer and swoop you away and you can go get smoothies. If I don't reply in a timely manner, which I almost certainly will not, or the logistics don't work, call an older female friend or relative who has left a bad marriage, and they will be there in 10 seconds. If you're wondering if you have to do it, you almost certainly shouldn't. Yes, the wedding was beautiful, but oh, the internal screaming. A good bit of ugly crying during our honeymoon in Sicily when, yet again, I violated some principle I didn't understand and stormed off, leaving me in the streets. It turns out you can go around the world together and still feel alone. I had a series of increasingly deranged thoughts. My grandmother didn't have a super happy marriage, but she was an exceptionally happy person. Maybe I need to meditate more. The subject of this first-person New York Times essay felt like she'd made a mistake too, but through perseverance and personal effort, it turns out she absolutely did not make a mistake and is now the happiest woman on earth. Perhaps I'm her. Maybe I can have some kids and then co-parent with them. Maybe I will turn into a bird and fly away. It was utterly impossible to be together that didn't involve constant, grinding conflict. I'm not going to say it was warfare, both of us putting everything on the line to gain a yard or two, but it wasn't not that. In the end, there just wasn't a moment when I could acknowledge and act upon the sad, deep truth of our relationship. No matter how much we truly and sincerely loved each other, we were fundamentally very different people, neither of whom could or should change enough to satisfy the other. So after one especially terrible night, I left. I fled our house from Salem, my quasi-hometown 45 miles to the south. I said it was because of a book deadline that I wanted to get away from distractions. The truth is that I wanted to get away from them. The absence of my husband was deeply soothing. At some point, a much older friend said to me, well, you can divorce. Not everything works out. And this felt like someone saying, hey, you actually don't have to eat any more of those burning coals. Just stop putting them in your mouth. Just not eat them. There's a revelation. Maybe an hour after she said that to me, I was sitting in my friend Emily's backyard. I'd sent a text to my 3 closest friends. Emily, Carrie, and Margaret dropped everything. Margaret had been driving her an hour to sit around a fire with me, do tarot, and give space to voice what I'd known for a long time but never said aloud. I don't think I can stay married, I said. There was a long pause. That's a fucking bummer, said Margaret, which was the most perfect thing anyone could have said at the moment. I'm going to skip forward a tiny bit here. So the word gets out about my verse. My godparents and godbrother hear about it from my soon-to-be ex, and so do many of my friends. He talks to my sister before I do. They call me to ask if I'm okay, and I tell them I am, while internally screaming. I only have the emotional capacity to explain to one person every 3 days, and really I'd just rather talk to a few people who already know about it. Yet my phone is exploding with concerned outrage. I know that every second that goes by when I'm sloshing around in my own feelings instead of writing is a second I will regret when it's too late, and I avoid everyone. I have made an altar in the rented room where I'm staying away from him, full of my higher power counsel and photos of my beloved departed granny Barb and her sister Aunt Corky. I am praying to it constantly that I can focus, do a good job on this book, do the right thing by my soon-to-be ex, hold it together, and stay sane. On the upside, I have a Miata. Money cannot buy happiness, but if you have $3,000, it can buy fun in the form of a 1994 Mazda Miata. The car is exceptional and perfect. It is a street-legal go-kart that someone has made into a convertible. It is the exquisite British roadster that England never managed to create. It has a goofy Fisher-Price engine. Here are the spark plugs. Here's where the oil goes. That I can actually work on, even though I know nothing about cars. It is more fun at 35 miles an hour than most cars are at 90. A Miata is more than a car. It is my baby. It will live for 250,000 miles, and I love it. And let me tell you something. When you're driving a top-down 1994 Miata with Eleanor the dog, you are a one-dog parade. Eleanor is my dog, also my very heart. I'm going to pause and show you guys some little illustrations, because I did do dorky illustrations. So here's the nice thing about a Miata, like the old school Miatas, is that when I draw an inanimate object, I draw like a smiley face on it or a frowny face on it, or like I'm just a total animist and everything has a little soul and it's like emoting at me. With the Miata, you don't need to, because the Miata has a beautiful little smiling, happy face anyway. This is my dog, Eleanor. I wish she was here. She would delight you all. She's 110 pounds and adorable. She's part St. Bernard, part Muppet, and she looks like someone sewed 3 dogs together. She has a handsome, noble beauty that she constantly undermines with her goofiest. For these, she's the funniest being I have ever met. Just watching her move through the day, doing weird things with her mouth, making dinosaur noises, brings me the deepest joy. But back to the Miata. I love driving, and I do it a lot. As a child, I dreamt of the day I could drive, and when I finally could, it was even better than I imagined. To this day, I still often feel like a 16-year-old with an infinite sense of both safety and freedom when my hand is on the stick. I have a small space around me that is fun, and it can be as hot or as cold as I want. Whatever music I want will be playing, following my wish. And when I get sick of the song, that song will be over. In it, I can go downtown, or up to Portland, or to the beach, or Mount Hood, or Mexico, or Chile. I can go anywhere. Honestly, the husband should have known something was up when I bought a 90s Miata. Things never work out for one spouse when the other has just bought a fun and practical sports car. And what am I? Not through the form. I drive fast through fields and forest. I blast Nicki Minaj and Rich White Ladies with Beyonce. I've made a playlist of every song I've loved since I was 15. These songs remind me that I exist and remain the same person through space and time. Sometimes I drive to a county park where the sun finally goes down around 9:30 and watch the meteor showers by myself. For the first time since puberty, I don't wish that anyone was sitting beside me. I don't need a love interest for this to be a complete story. I know that I can have significant and enduring relationships outside of marriage, that I can commit and rely on my closest friends. As friends as my partnerships. I know I call my own shots. Every time I look at the water tower that says independence in all caps, these truths are reaffirmed. Haha, what a dummy I am. So there we go. Thank you. Thank you for the claps. I love that. Yeah, I highly recommend getting a divorce, actually. I didn't get to I love my divorce. And it's really funny because we're truly in divorce season now. Like, I don't know about y'all, but I feel like about 40% of the couples that I know that are married are getting a divorce. And you always have to suss out where they're at, because it's really funny. When I would tell people I was getting divorced, I'm going to say it was mostly the men here who get like so serious and so sad. And they would like be like, so in like 10, 15 years, it's going to get better. And you will be yourself again someday. And I was like, And then the women were like, congratulations. All of them, they have the best stories about, my favorite was this one very lovely woman who is, I won't name her. She is someone who has like a bold-faced name and has been, sort of a doyen of Oregon forever. And so changing names here, but she was like, congratulations, I had to wait decades for Harold to die. And I have to say, that made me feel very grateful that I was just allowed to go. I was allowed to get a divorce and leave. So if you are in an unhappy pandemic relationship right now, and you're going through it, I'm truly sorry. And also someday I think you'll be very happy, because life is short for bad marriages. Now, we can do one of two things. We can talk about crafting and learn to make a little lucky paper star, or we can ask questions, or somebody can submit a third-party topic, because then I will happily spiel on pretty much whatever you ask me about. So, what should we do first? Craft, questions? What do we think?
I do have 2 questions.
You do have 2 questions.
You all will indulge me.
Yeah.
So first, when was this happening during writing Adulting? Or what's the timeline?
That's a great question. So Adulting had come out. I was working on a second book called Gracious, which was really ironic because I was doing like the weirdest thing, leaving the marriage after 6 months. And in fact, so all of this was the summer of 2016, which I don't know, who can say about anybody's politics? Folks who are mostly women or bed on a Thursday, who can say who was for, who we might vote for? It might be that like some of us were a little freaked out in 2016, you know what I mean? And so it was that summer that I left. And actually, I love election day, and this is so cheesy, but I dropped my divorce paperwork in the mail on election day. I'm like, we're gonna have our first woman president, and I'm getting divorced, and like neither of those things worked out. It turns out the paperwork is extremely difficult. They would send it back with like one little section highlighted, and I would go through the section and send it back. Complicated process. So Adulting was out. I was working on the second book, and the book was supposed to be turned in, I think like August 15th, and I left like July 21st. So it was great timing on my part. Although I did get I left my year to book extension, so that's nice. Apparently they build in time because authors always do like really dramatic things on book deadline. Sometimes so yeah, first book was out, had success, got married, freaked out, writing second book. That's where we began.
Okay.
That's where we began our lovely scene.
How has your family reacted to you spilling details?
So it's interesting. I am really, it was really hard to write about generally, like people in my life that I care about, because like I'm very aware, and always have been in writing. Like I'm always really shocked when people put someone really on blast in print, because it's like the people that I write about, like being in my life, do not consent to be a part of my work. I mean, people argue about that all the time. I would say you don't necessarily. And B, like anyone that I write about is never going to have like a platform to respond. Like it's possible my ex-husband, because he's very funny and very smart, gets his own book deal and gets to tell his side, of course, but he's probably not going to, right? So it was up to me to be really careful about how I wrote about people. In most cases, almost all cases, I gave people the opportunity to read what I'd written about them. And I also just erred on the side of, discretion. And that actually became a little bit complicated later in the book, because there's 3 people in the book who I did have very close relationships with that I don't now. And there was some tough stuff that happened there, like some really, which you will have to read in the book. And stuff that I was really angry and hurt about. And so on the one hand, like it was satisfying game of like, wow, this person has hurt me so deeply. And now I have a chance to hash it out in print, don't I? We can really get to the bottom of it. But instead, what I elected to do is realize that like my feelings on any one person or situation are not going to last forever, but a book is. And so in a lot of places, I did something that to be a cop-out as a writer, which is like, I would say something happened next that I can't really get into. And it's just too personal. And I don't want to get into the details of it. You're just going to have to believe me that the outcome was XYZ. I also did a lot of reporting for this. That's my normal comfort zone, is to go ask someone, okay, what happened next? And what then? And why did you do this? And why do you think they did that? You know, and then report what others had told me. And so I went back to lots of people that were around for these things. And I said, what was your opinion of this? How did you feel about it? And I do tend to be like, when my ex-husband read the section about him, he was like, you're like comically nice about me. He's like, I don't know that you needed to spend like 3 pages hyping me up. And I'm like, well, it's true though. Like I wanted people to know that like there are amazing things about you and there are amazing things about our relationship. And also that I couldn't be in it. I didn't just want to be like, this dude was shitty, we fought all the time, so I had to leave. Like, because that's not the truth of that. And the harder parts, I don't want out there in the world. So there's that. My family, like, I didn't tend to spill things about other people. Very conscientious about what is my secret versus what is a shared secret. You know what I mean? And personally for me, and this is like an AA thing that I heard and I love it, like having been a really, really like private, nobody can know anything about the person for a really, really long time. Just being like, yep, these are the worst things about me. And anybody can go read them in exchange for $26. You know what I mean? Like there's this thing like you're only as thick as your secrets. And it's like, yeah, like there is nothing intimidating to me in life anymore, because like there's nothing that you could say about me that is frightening, you know? Again, the things that I went through in terms of like having a really deep depression, going through a divorce, loss of female friendships, which is actually a huge, huge theme in this book, because it's something that a lot of women go through and don't really have language to talk about that kind of grief around that loss. I realized that they're just not that interesting. I mean, they are interesting, right? But it's not that interesting that it happened to me. There's nothing uniquely interesting or weird about me that these things happened. And now that we're in a place where, no offense, but everyone else is crazy too, I'm even more comfortable with it. My mom thought I was a little bit too flippant. Like, there is some stuff about like hospitalization, suicide in here, and which I did my best to make funny. And my mom's like, well, I didn't find it very funny. I'm like, I know, that's a really fair critique. You do not find it funny whatsoever. But I think that she also understands that, like, for me, like, finding what is funny, finding what is light, finding like dark humor in something is the way that I'm like, well, I own that situation now. Like, that story is mine, that narrative is mine. And I have made my own meaning and hopefully some good jokes out of it. So does anybody else have any questions? I'd love to give a long-winded answer. Like, if you ask me what time it is, I'll tell you.
We have another question.
Questions?
Do we make a StarCraft?
I think we should make a StarCraft. I'm gonna have to hopefully.
Here's my thought on that.
Here's your thought on that.
I'm gonna come next to you.
So I
that's a
think
great idea.
you can actually put the mic down,
Yes.
and then that way everybody on Zoom can really see it, and you all will still be able to see
I
it.
think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Sorry,
Occasionally I
am
have
on
them.
or off?
You all can hear her without it. I think we can just turn it off.
Okay.
Yeah, it's right on the side right there.
All right. So guys, here's the deal. One, I think everybody has 2 strips. The deal with this craft is that you're just going to need more than 2. Okay. Like, this is a craft with, I mean, you're only going to need 1 strip per star, but you're going to make these, and your first 5 to 10 are going to look really stupid and be frustrating. Okay. Because that's the nature of this craft, and that's the nature of kind of every craft. And you just have to kind of push through it, because once you get it, it's actually very easy. And I'm glad we have a smaller crowd tonight, because this means I can like go around and do hands-on work. Okay. So we're going to start by doing is you're going to take the end, put the white side kind of down. And can you see? I'm going to,
Yeah, you're good.
And then you make like a little awareness ribbon loop like this. Like, you could think of like if you would pin it to yourself. And the key here is that it's going to be white here and white there. Like, if you flip it around, it's fully the colored side, because it's easy to like flip one side and go like this or something. But we want a smooth continuum of white with just a little bitty tail at the end like this. Got it? Looks like you're on your way. Okay, you guys are good. Perfect, perfect. You're gonna want to make your loop a little bit smaller and tighter. You want a small little loop here, and you want it to be very close to one end. Okay. So now, pinching that little part right there, you're going to take your long tail and sort of slide it up and through that little hole at the top of your awareness loop. You're going to slowly pull it up through there. And then you're going to, if you let go of it, you will see that you have what looks a little bit like a simple knot that you would just tie in a string, you know, like an overhand knot. And you're going to slowly pull on it and tighten it up and just like slide the paper through, trying to keep the tail longer if possible. Okay. And then as it gets a little bit tighter, let's see, I'm going to come around.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to come around. Perfect. Try to make that tail shorter, like slide it along. See where you're at? Perfect. That is looking gorgeous. Just try to make this tail longer. Sure. Okay. Gorgeous. Stunning. Perfect.
Did you look in the book?
Yes, that is perfect. You do have too much tail, but you can just kind of slide through. You do have a little bit too much tail.
Perfect reading.
This is so fun. Okay. Okay. Great. So everybody really nailed that step. And the good news is that is like the single most difficult step. And this is what really trips up like kids when I do it with them. So congratulations to everyone. So now that you have your little knot, you're going to kind of carefully flatten it. Okay. So then you're going to have, once it's nice and flat, you're going to have something that looks a little bit like this. Okay. Now this extra tail piece here, your short little tail, you do not need. So what you're going to do is you might have to fold it in half, or you might even have to fold it over a couple times if it's a longer tail. And then you're going to fold it in to the center. So then you have like what looks like this, like a little pentagon with a little long tail at the end. Perfect. Nailed it. Nailed it. Gonna come by and look. It's you have to think it's like okay, let's go. She's doing your okay. Okay, you're doing your
Now, the important thing here about this part is that you want it to be as close to a pentagon shape, the 5 sides, as possible. Now, does everyone remember when you were little and you learned to draw a 5-pointed star like this? Where you went like up, down, this way, that way, and back. And each time you were kind of going like 40% more around the circle, if that makes sense. You're not just going back and forth. We're going to start wrapping the tail, and it's going to follow that same kind of geometry. Okay. And the best way to do this is like you take the tail and you make it go up like this, and then you're just going to fold it flat down along this edge. And if you fold it flat along the edge, then your tail is now going to line up with another one of the edges of the pentagon. Okay. And then, is everyone feeling good about that? Okay. And then you're going to do the same thing. And I like to push it from behind and just really make sure that that bottom edge is flat. Now, here's the thing is that it can be really tempting. It's easy to, when you do this, to accidentally fold to the wrong side, right? Because if you're folding it from here, it's easy to go either to that side or accidentally go over to this side instead. If you find that it's starting to look like more like a house, straight up and down, than a pentagon, then that's when you know that you have gone awry, okay? And then once you've done that, you just keep winding it and you keep following that geometry and just being really careful that you're going to the side that is correct. Instead of making a house, we always want to keep it to pentagon status. You know, it's funny, when I started teaching this, I kept saying pentagram again and again and again. And
It's not wrong.
pentagrams, and I mean, it's not wrong, but it's also like not, well, something, yeah, that's the thing. It's a controversial shape and a controversial word. So you're just going to keep doing that until you only have a little bitty bit of tail left like this. Yeah, let's show them. We're going to show them. Yep, little tiny bit of tail. And this is like the nice meditative part that you can, like, once you get used to it, you can kind of do it while you're watching TV or whatever, like sort of mindlessly. So then you're going to want to have a tail that's about this long. It can't be too short because we have to tuck it in. So if it's a lot shorter than this, then it's not going to work. If it's a lot longer than that, you can, again, fold it in half. And once you go to bring it around, you'll find that there is a very convenient little sort of pocket that it can be tucked into. I'm going to show them here. Right underneath. Yep. And then you should have a beautiful, tiny, tiny little pentagon. This. If anybody's struggling, if anybody has any comments or questions, feel free to ask. Here we go. I'm sure this is very easy to follow along at home for everyone. Got, but come look. It's looking good from here. I gotta put my hands on. Right, let me see this. That is very nice. Good job. Yeah. Perfect. One and done. Yeah. This is perfect. Ideal. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Yes. I'll oh yeah, here's where you there. And like I said, this is a craft that you're not going to get it perfectly right the first or second or third time. But once you do get it right, you will be able to do it forever. You can make it out of magazine strips. You can make it out of anything. You can get these little strips at a Japanese stationery store. It's possible that online retailers, a giant online retailer might have some. They might not. I don't know. We would never speak about that here. So now we've got this, and we're going to have to puff it out to make a little star shape. Okay. Now this is the part that is a little bit counterintuitive. Because you're going to want to hold it like we've been holding it, like with one finger on each side, right? But you can't do that anymore. You got to hold it by the edge. Because you see, if you're holding it like this, it can't puff out this way, which is what we want. So you're going to put one finger on each edge. Then you're going to take your little fingernails, and you're just going to kind of pinch at the point like that. And then you're going to go around, and you're going to pinch the next one. And then the next one, and the next one. And now you do have a little star.
So if you do get bigger paper, then
Mhm.
the stars could be bigger.
The stars will be
Yeah,
bigger.
okay.
Yes.
There is a plethora of paper online.
There is so much paper. Also, someone told me, and I had not fact checked this myself, but I don't see any reason to believe that it wouldn't be true. That it actually originated in China, that people would make them out of ribbons that they got for presents, that you would make a little star out of your ribbon from a special present, which is really cute. And I do recommend. So how's everyone doing here? Yeah, I will. Okay. So,
Star. So
but you got it right. Because
it's like this.
Oh, we're pulling them out.
Yeah, you're kind of
Oh,
like
no, I'm
forcing the corners a little bit with your nails to get them to, and I cut off all my nails recently. So yeah.
I don't follow directions well.
are you having a problem? Everybody ends up with a house their first time, y'all. It's a everyone's gonna have a house, and not that we want. You know what? No, I think we actually got this pretty well. I think what may have happened if I was gonna diagnose is that I think when you initially tried to pinch, you might have been holding it still, and then I couldn't pinch out. It's like you have to. Otherwise, yeah.
Are you already doing a second one? See, that's why I put out 2 papers. I have more papers if anyone wants to take some home too, or take all the ones off the chairs.
See how we doing?
Yeah, they got it.
That is perfect. That is perfect.
Right?
Guys, you're on your way. Yeah, so you're gonna
Awesome.
try another one. We have lots of strips.
Yeah, we have lots of
We
strips.
have lots and lots of strips.
Did we have any more questions, or do you just want to kind of chill out? I think I might end the Zoom, but then we're gonna have signings, so we're just gonna relax and have a good time. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna end that.